Hello, everybody, and welcome back to RHAP's coverage of Australian Survivor Redemption. My name is Mike Bloom, and I, yet again, am astounded. I am stupefied. I am mystified. What are these people doing? We have the latest in the eternal string of questionable decisions that have been made to get into. And this is the penultimate episode. The final proper vote out of the season ended up being perhaps one of the most controversial of the entire season. But I am so excited to break it all down. This entire episode, I screamed, I cried, I didn't throw up, Jackson did, but I am willing word vomit about all my thoughts on this final three and what it means for the final two. And alongside with me in this veritable torture chamber when it comes to watching these people make decisions sometimes is Pooya.
Never have I felt more solid in my decision making than watching this season because I'm surprised, Mike. I am perplexed. I'm happy because I think it makes it a lot more fun for this end game, but I'm very, very, very surprised that we ended up with the result we did. I didn't think it was possible. I thought it was Curtains McGee. The minute he stepped down, I was like, why are we even watching the rest of this episode? Like, it doesn't matter. Wild.
I'm still hours later laughing about this. It feels a little exploitative to say it, but Pooya, I kid you not, I have watched the vote reveal and subsequent reaction at least a dozen times because it is, and I say in no sort of overstatement, a genuine work of art. The music buildup where things just fall out from under you, the weird, orchestra hits, Jackson's wide mouth, the jury is in shock, and Laz is just stuck there in this eternal face, head a scoot 45 degrees of how the hell did this happen? A question that we are all asking right now, Pooya, as yet again, two roads divulged in a yellow wood, and somehow a player this season is going to take the one certainly less traveled and perhaps for good reason.
Yeah, I think that we can definitely break it down. It's always fun to do so. I can start to see some patterns where this could be the case, but there were a lot of emotions this episode and a lot of reactions this episode that were just memorable. This was for an episode that I really thought we are going to come here and talk about a challenge and then leave. I feel like there was a lot of depth that we experienced.
Oh my God, I could not agree more. I thought this was a fantastic piece of television, which is so wild because we had been talking about this. I even talked about it yesterday with Chappelle. I'm like, are we really dedicating an entire episode to the final three, which almost always amounts to an endurance challenge, going to tribal council, barely any time to talk, and then a very rote vote out? I mean, let's paint the picture here. I have not been so shocked to see an outcome in a final three, final four vote, whatever you want to call it, the penultimate vote of the season, since, ironically enough, Sharn did it by voting out Brian Lake nearly a decade ago. And here we are again. Caleb holds all the power here. And as David highlights in the previously on, he is caught in the middle, which is weird to say, between two heated rivals and two underdogs who have become each other's closest confidants. Caleb, during Laz's final argument in front of the jury, looks into her eyes and says, I wouldn't be in the game if it wasn't for you. And mere minutes later, he goes up to the voting booth and has the audacity to write her name down. This was the face crack of the season. It is one of my favorite reactions that I've seen in a vote in Australian Survivor because everyone except for Caleb was absolutely floored. When you have David basically saying on the way out as they leave, oh, brother, like, you know that you have created an iconic Survivor moment.
This is I picture you cackling watching this. The fact that you've rewatched it.
Oh my God.
This is your bread and butter.
Oh my God, like it's the entire meal for me. First off, I was completely jaw agape. I almost fell off my couch. Like I know these are statements, but I kid you not. Because again, and I give so much kudos to the storytelling here because I was ready, Puya, to come on here and be like, it sucks that Jackson had to go out the way that he did. But look, we've seen people talk about how they didn't get the win, but they found their redemption. You know, Simon,
Hmm.
he couldn't win, but his redemption was being in on a big move and having power in the game. Brooke's redemption wasn't winning. It was rediscovering that part of herself that she thought she left behind a decade ago. Jackson, yeah, he lost the game, but he had his mother embracing him in pure love, saying how proud of him she is. And so I was ready to eulogize this man, and I'm sure Jackson was as well,
Hmm.
not realizing that all of this was to set up that somehow, some way, something he did worked. And I guess that's the first place we need to go here, Puya. Do you read this decision as influenced at all by what Jackson said at Tribal Council? Or do you think Caleb had his mind made up either during the challenge or even before it?
I think there's no world where I wouldn't consider. I think I consider it a hybrid of the two. I think that was Jackson's reminder of, hey, you have kind of been, not to give too many things. Actually, I'm not going to say that thing because I don't want to make a reference to spoil something for other people to enjoy. But the two of you have kind of been working in unison. There might be a bit of a tough time to split hairs here. There's even a world where you might be underestimating your opponent. And then if you sit there with the opponent underestimated, they can come back and they can take you down. And we've seen this happen before, Mike. We've seen this happen in the final two before. Go all the way back to the first season of the rebooted Australian Survivor. And we can talk about that. So for me, I think that served as a good reminder, but I want to go back to the challenge because the minute Jackson falls, and there's a lot of tears, there's a lot of emotion there, Laz is a stone cold killer. Laz all business. Laz like, all right, then you drop. I need this for my argument. I don't know why you're still standing there. Just drop for me and this will be good. I cannot be taken. She kept repeating, I cannot be taken. I can't imagine after being there. I don't know how long exactly it was when she started making those pleas.
4+ hours. Well, I guess they ended at 4+ hours, but I imagine it probably would have lasted longer than like half an hour after Jackson dropped.
Like I'm struggling and you're out here telling me to drop so you can have a better argument against me and then you're going to take me? No, I do not want that. I wonder if there was a world where Caleb thought, oh, she's not taking me. I wonder if he was thinking, oh, you need to you're thinking resume and arguments. Well, I am the number one trophy here to take out. Maybe he thought that wasn't going to be, maybe he thought that he wasn't going to make it there if he gave it to her and that spooked him. I don't know. I think ultimately it was the most Caleb decision of all time because that is the most chaotic way he went about doing all of it.
But it's wild because I talked about this yesterday with Chappelle. As much as he was known by this chaotic moniker, he's been kind of Mr. Straight and Narrow the past couple of weeks, right? Once he's sort of locked in with this underdog newbie alliance, they've been grouped together. Yeah, they kind of went rogue and voted Cameron, but that was all together here. He was really chaotic in name only. And so maybe he felt like he needed to bring it back to his brand for a second. I've strayed too far of what makes Caleb. And he makes the decision. Now, I think you bring up some interesting points here. And I think the editing certainly wants us to believe that part of it might have been because Laws was so ardent about, you've got to give me this one. Now, for what it's worth, they didn't make a deal before the challenge happened. But maybe Caleb thought like, that's sort of like a fun, fanciful fan fiction. But when we get to that point, we'll just sort of tough it out there. That maybe his mind starts spinning as he's standing up there, anything to take his mind off the pegs of, okay, wait, if she is so adamant that she get the necklace, is she planning to do something tonight?
Right.
On the other hand, you are thinking about this being betrayed at the hands of a person who purposely forced a tie the day before to essentially keep you in the game, knowing that you were the best firemaker within the people that were remaining. She forced a tie, and I think really basically said, Caleb, welcome to the final three because you were going to win no matter what. In what world would she then, near 24 hours later, be like, actually, never mind. Sorry, Caleb, you're gone now. That's only something Caleb can do, Pooya.
Yeah, I do. Am I wilding if I say I kind of see his POV on this decision a little bit?
Please,
Maybe.
wild away, sir.
I just I feel like Caleb he put his mark on the game that first tribal into the merge, right? Where it was very clear Caleb wanted it to be known, I am playing my game. I think that riding with his group, straight now, you're absolutely right. He runs the half idle gambit on Brooke. He then continues to whittle down numbers with his group solidly. Then we get to last episode, and it's a 2-2. He still has his one person in laws. Is it not the most my game decision if you end up cutting everyone else that you were associated with to be at the end alone as your game with a traitor, a person who defected from your
Kat's
group?
been gone weeks ago, Pooya.
She went out week one. So I can kind of maybe see it. We have to talk about the numbers and the votes when we get there. But as far as a just mental state to be in, I can see it. Like, I can empathize. I can put myself in his shoes for that. Now, is it a winning move or is it a losing move? We can discuss further. My instincts was like there was an easier move on the table and you didn't take it. So, yeah.
All right, so I'll continue on your train of thought here. Let's keep wilding out here. I'll try to fill in a couple of pieces of logic, if you will, based on especially this voting confessional that we got from Caleb, which, again, we needed uncut because this came so far out of nowhere in the moment. And it does provide a couple of interesting pieces of context here. So the full quote is, "Laws, you're the reason I'm in this game, but I can't pitch against a single mom with 2 kids. I just couldn't do it. I never win, and I wouldn't want to win, and I want to stick it to Jackson. I'm sorry. You are my friend." I don't know if the feeling is mutual. So there's a couple different elements here. The one that you fixated on is something that actually the edit highlighted all the way back at the beginning of the merge. Differentiation. There is a tribal council, I think it might have been the Mark Tribal Council, where the returnees are talking about you all can't stick in one big group and run it to the end together. You have to be able to differentiate your game from one another. Jackson carries forward that argument all the way to the penultimate day of the game and talks about the fact that, yeah, you and Laws have pretty much been in lockstep this entire post-merge. I know you hadn't met until that point, but you trusted in one another. How tough is it going to be? Yeah, you have the Mark move, but does it Laws have relationships? Does it Laws have people that she was close with? How do you think they're going to react? Is it always going to be, if it's a split decision between you and Laws, that they'll choose you every time? The other element here that we did not necessarily fixate upon when Chappelle and I were, again, drawing out the, at the time, wildly fantastical scenario where Caleb and Jackson would be in the final 2, is the story element. David said at the merge, when you get to the end, you need to have a story. Now, the usual connotation to that, right, is you got to have a resume, you got to make moves, you got to have credentials to you. But story does not always equal resume. And this is what we get into what Caleb said in his voting confessional, which is, I cannot sit at the end with a single mother of 2. And this is so interesting, Pooya, because this is an element that does not get talked about a lot on Survivor. And it actually makes me think of a moment in Survivor Guatemala, one of the more forgotten moments from one of the more forgotten seasons. At the Final 4 of Survivor Guatemala, forgive me for a second here, folks. Let's dive through Survivor history. So it was the Final 4. It was Rafe and Stephanie were in the power position. They could choose between either voting out Danny, who had allies on the jury and was an underdog, or Lydia, who from our perspective was perceived as a bit more of a quote-unquote floater, a coaster, a passenger, whatever label you want to assign to it. She had a much quieter edit in comparison. And Rafe and Stephanie chose to side with Danny and voted out Lydia. And I think years later, people are like, that was one of the stupidest decisions I've ever seen. Why did they do that? We find out after the fact, Rafe has certainly expressed as much, that Lydia has this incredible story of, you know, being this working mother, coming from a lower class background. She was really well liked on the tribe. And so they felt, when immersed in the game, this narrative was way too good to let touch the end game whatsoever. And it seems like Caleb is subscribing to a bit of that logic. Now, here is one of the many issues, I would say, about all of this. Yes, as you mentioned, maybe there is something to this season is about playing a me game. So I want to stand here on my own. No arguments being made about laws did this and I did this. But why on earth do you sit there in front of not only the person you are about to send to the jury, but the jury itself saying, in no uncertain terms, basically, like, thank you so much for keeping me in the game. I really appreciate that. Here's the thing, to go back to my original question to you, Pooya, whether or not Jackson's argument got him over the line at the end of the day, I honestly think it's immaterial. What matters is not what we think, but what the jury thinks. And just like Jackson told Laws the day before, you just gave Caleb a fire-making move. I think Caleb just gave Jackson a swing vote move.
Yes. I think if Jackson recognizes that and utilizes it, he can make that case very easily that he was dead to rights and he was able to convince through his mouth to get himself into the final two. I think what's interesting too, and why I think this is a fatal flaw in what Caleb did. Mike, we've been watching the jury. Obviously, we get all the context. So like we are not like Caleb's his own person. They're on the island. That being said, I feel like the jury has been very clear in celebrating moves and celebrating good gamesmanship, no matter what. So I understand the world where you're like, Laws is like a lovable person, and like, you know, that might be enough to get her. I've played the game a little dirty. If there's any jury that I felt like will reward good gameplay, no matter how dirty or scummy your backstabbing was, it's this one. People are literally backstabbing their closest allies and then hugging right after. Allies are leaving idols behind for each other. Like this is a game recognized game ass jury. So you don't need to worry about that step. And I'm telling you this right now, just seeing the opening confessional from Jackson this episode, I was reminded he is a wrestler. He is cutting a promo. If there's anyone that's going to be going in with all the energy, it's him. It's him. He's going to be so animated.
He was sitting there making this argument, and the jury is saying, oh, that is a good argument. And if you're Caleb and you're sitting there and saying, oh, that is a good argument, that to me is the number one reason why you should get rid of Jackson. If this man is so good at talking in front of the entire jury about what this move means for you narratively, do you not think he could very easily do that for himself the next day? It's also really interesting because I certainly have seen through some of those like juries out videos that Nick has been doing, which were taken at the time that these people were voted out, that I do not think they were big fans of Laws. I do not think Laws had a lot of fans on that jury. And so it does seem a little open and shut to me. And we go back to Sharn voting out Brian Lake. Yes. And as similar as these might seem on the surface, the reactions are what differentiates it for me. When it comes to champions versus contenders, Brian, first off, just the very fun thing of basically looking at Sharn and being like, well, you just lost the game. Congratulations. But Brian and Sharn were not necessarily like the tightest of tight allies. In fact, the entire endgame was almost akin to like a Ben and Chrissy from Heroes, Healers, Hustlers, where they then turned against one another. And they were, you know, Sharn and Shane basically were trying to take shots at Brian and his gang all that they could. So in that perspective, maybe Sharn's still like, okay, listen, I know Brian doesn't feel great right now, but like maybe he still has enough respect for my game to vote for me the next day. I just cannot see a scenario where, again, you built this incredible relationship with this person. You say to her face and in confessional, if I don't win, I want her to win. And then you say, okay, bye. All the promises I made to take you to the final two, the power was all in my hands, but I'm not going to do that anymore because I want to stick it to Jackson. Sorry, you're going to the jury because it'll make for a better final tribal council if I beat Jackson. I cannot imagine how bitter of a taste this has left in Law's mouth. She was clearly very shocked in her final words, really trying to puzzle through exactly what was happening. And if what we saw in the teaser is any indication, we will see the most furious version of this woman that we have seen for the past month and a half in this game, because it feels a little bit like he was playing in front of her face.
I think that this is probably the biggest differentiation for me between US Survivor now and Australian Survivor, in that the amount of days they're sitting through and a final two. These two make everything feel a lot more personal, I imagine. Again, never been on the island. And like, to me, to get that close to the 500,000, to sit on the torture rack for like a good 4 hours with your final two, probably spending however long Jackson was already off the board being like, well, no matter which one of us win, we're the final two. That's fun. That's going to be a fun. And you're probably practicing what you're going to say, how you're going to go about it, only to then have the rug pulled from under you like this. And mind you, if you're Laws, you literally just gave him a fire-making opportunity and gave him more credit when you could have just taken him out and gone to the end with Sally, who was still searching for her big move, potentially. And I feel like you are probably kicking yourself. Like, you're probably kicking yourself. You're feeling like you are stupid, and then you're feeling angry towards this person. And I think that is a very hard thing to overcome. I always like to think, Mike, that if I was in a situation like this, I would be able to put things aside and just vote for the gameplay. But if I was on the brink, if I was 24 hours away from pleading my case for $500,000 and you did me dirty, I don't know, man. I don't know if I could divorce it. That's not enough time. Give me 4 days at Ponderosa with some friends and some drinks. I might get over it. But 24 hours, I might be seething still.
Well, like you mentioned, I wonder if Caleb was unfortunately faultily banking on this idea of when people betray their closest allies, they are immediately greeted with, I totally understand. I would have done the same. We've seen basically two exceptions to that, and that was Keely with Sally, and that was Laws with Caleb. And I do think in both cases, it felt like maybe at least being perceived as leading someone along. And I think this is going to be the thing Caleb needs to answer for tomorrow. And that's what this comes down to, is in a season of unnecessarily complicating your own game. Ironically enough, the person that Caleb is sitting next to did perhaps the most prominent version of that before this episode in betraying his number one ally and actively swapping into a minority. Now, this, I think, is going to become a thing that Caleb has to defend. Instead of, I think, providing a lot of cases as to the entire body of work, the Mark move, the fact that he was able to get Brooke to admit she had a half idol, I would not be surprised in the least if this is going to be the central point of conversation, like we saw with Wu and Tony as a good example of you had everything in your hand. Jackson's torch was basically snuffed. Why would you want to do this? And again, I think we've assigned some logic to it. Obviously, I'll get the chance to talk with Caleb to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. But even if he wins this game, Pooya, there was a much better, safer path. But that is not the MO of Australian Survivor Redemption. It hasn't been since the first vote, and it will not be through the last vote.
We got a redemption within a redemption. Jackson got a second chance at redemption here, to really plead his case. And it comes at the heels of Caleb's decision, who now is fighting for his own redemption of redeeming himself after making a stupid decision like cutting Laws at the final three. So it works. It's a lot of redemption and not a lot of time left. We have one more episode to go. But I kind of want to talk about, and I cannot believe these words are about to leave my mouth. I want to talk about this immunity.
Okay,
challenge.
We need to get into this because
yeah,
this is, I'm glad you invoked 2016 before, because that had some fun aspects in Christie's out of nowhere win, which was arguably the smaller out of nowhere win of that entire episode, and the optics of the wave splashing on the rocks. But the sequence that we experienced of Jackson going through the 9 circles of hell in this challenge is perhaps the most invigorated I have been watching a challenge in a very long time. It
Mm-hmm.
was visceral. We have obviously the bread and butter of Australian Survivor is putting these people in the most torturous situations in the final immunity challenge. And we've seen a fair amount of them, and we've seen people grimace and wince through the pain. We have not seen anything like what Jackson went through. That sequence where he's like, I'm gonna throw up, and he's flop sweat, and he's crying, and he's red in the face, the quivering in his body before he goes into like a trance and rights himself and just nods and says, I'm not falling off. Goosebumps, honestly, like absolute goosebumps. I was mesmerized by it.
I've never felt what that other person felt in a immunity quite like this one. Like I felt pain watching this. But I can't take my eyes off of it. Like him, basically, I don't know how to describe, but him being on that in that rack, just being punished and basically just having silent tears and like relieve his eyes as like he's watching his mom, who he didn't even think his mom was going to be there because she don't have a passport,
Oh
which
my
like
God.
that was a blindside for him. And like he said that him and his mom didn't see eye to eye, but like he realizes because they're more alike than he thought, and they're both like very heavy-handed, and they want what they want and they will not take no for an answer. To watch him basically say he cannot quit in front of his mom until his body gives out, where he has to get hugged off of this thing by David
Which I
and
will,
immediately crash into tears.
which we also need to say, now I think the David hiring does make even more sense because we forget that when it comes to these final endurance challenges, there is no safety team apparently on site to help these people whose bodies are in such a horrible state of atrophy. You have to have a big man come over as an MC who serves as like also a de facto landing pad to be like, yep, come on, jump on me, it'll be totally fine. But like, oh my God. I mean, I will fully admit I was crying during the sequence where Jackson ends up leaning so far forward and like onto David, and you hear him say, no, 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 no. And so you could tell, like, as much as people say, oh, it's about who wants it the most, this is one of those rare scenarios where he mentally was still in there. He would have been up there for 6 hours, but his body literally gave out. Like outside of Lauren O'Connell and Edge of Extinction, I cannot think of another reason where like basically someone passed out during the challenge. And that's essentially what happened to Jackson's body. And so he is crying out, feeling like he has lost out on this. This is game over right now. And so he is just sobbing in David's arms, which again is such a weird role for the hosting contestant that David happens to be there. But like David is the support system. But what really got me, God, what got me so badly was when Jody comes over, Jackson's lovely mom, and he's like, I'm sorry, mom, I couldn't do it. And she's like, don't you dare. You're the best. I've got you. I've got you. I'm like, it gets me emotional, honestly, talking about it because like, how much do you think that meant to him in the moment? Obviously, the biggest W to take away from that day would have been the necklace. But like you said, he didn't think his mother would be here at all. So to not only have her here in his presence, but to have her say, like, you're the best. I am so proud of you. And this is a man who has spent years at this point feeling like he has disappointed his family, that he has lived as the black sheep on this proverbial farm because he was letting his family down. He pursued his dreams, but it was to the detriment of everyone around him. He said in that cinema video, right, that he's like, this is the first time my mom has said that she's proud of me. So to have her show up as a complete surprise and to have her embrace him at one of his lowest moments and affirm to him, no matter how discouraged you might feel about yourself in this moment, you will always have my love. And like again, it gets me choked up to even talk about it because it felt like just such a meaningful moment to him, obviously, also to us, given this arc that we've had of Jackson the entire season.
Yeah, I everything we've learned about him lends to how devastated he would have been to have his mom come all the way here to watch him lose. That's how he's going to take it, right? As a competitor. He's like, if I take third, like third means nothing. That means I wasted my time, 45 days for nothing. So having that moment happen, and again, it all came down to his body shut down. Like he straight up was like, he had defeated himself mentally to stay up there, which I think is already hard enough to do. It was his body was like, all right, well, you overrode us on this one. We're not going to follow. We're just going to shut down on you. And like, you have nothing left to give. You have nothing left to give but tears. And, you know, basically for him, he's thinking, I got to the finish line and I couldn't cross.
Yeah. And it's, again, it speaks to his own attitude towards himself, right? Which is like, I didn't want to follow what people told me to do. But even when I went down my path, I haven't necessarily found the success that I wanted to. Like, I cannot imagine how personal that moment was, which makes me even happier that Jody in that moment was there to tell him what he needed to say. And makes me even happier now that somehow this man has gotten through to the final day of the game. Again, it would have been cake if Jackson went out here with his head held high, basically saying, like, I showed my mom that I'm stubborn as all get out for a good reason. And the only reason I lost this game is because my body failed me, not my spirit. But now he somehow is sitting in the final two with, I'd say, a pretty darn good chance of winning $500,000, which he did not think he would have an hour before that vote was made.
Incredible. Like the ups and downs, the hills and valleys, the roller coaster ride this like day would have been unbelievable.
Insane. Well, I want to focus on Laws here for a second, because let's talk about some possible alternate universes. Again, as I talked about with Chappelle, we are officially in the one universe where the stars somehow came together in this way, a perfect syzygy of chaos to give us a Caleb Jackson final two.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say that maybe Caleb steps down, maybe he falls off. Laws wins final immunity.
Okay.
Given the general pulse we had on her at that point, do you think she votes out Caleb as he may have been speculating? Or do you think it was, hey, I'll still take you, Caleb, but I just needed this sort of like punctuation point at the end of my survivor sentence?
Okay. So in the event that she was choosing to take Caleb to the end, sorry, not to take Caleb to the end, then to me, the final four vote is weird.
Yeah.
I think that is weird because I think that people will have known on the jury that Sally was a bit of a flip-floppy person and that Laws is the one who made that choice. I think that credit you could sell goes to Laws, realizing I cannot beat him and I'm probably at the final two no matter who wins immunity in the event that I go to final three with these two. Then that's your move. You've owned it. It's done. I think she was going to keep him. And you know, she really just wanted a notch on her resume to be like, this is my little thing. You have your thing. Now I have my thing. We're equals. I think for her, she made the mistake of looking at them as equals and as people playing the game together when that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, again, it would just be really odd behavior on Law's part in particular. Again, you could expect it maybe of some other people this season, but not Law's to be like, hey, Caleb, I kept you in the game one more day to then vote you out the next. Unless she really felt like Sally was such a wild card that Sally wouldn't take her to the end, that she had to get rid of Sally here, it would make very little sense to me. As you mentioned, if she feels like she is on the same level as Caleb, this is her point of differentiation. Yeah, Caleb may have done the Mark thing, but A, that was part of Ben's plan and Jackson's plan, and B, after that, the two have basically been in lockstep. So what is Law's move here? Hey, I brought Caleb to the end, essentially. He was powerless here. I was the one that had the power over these last couple of episodes. Now, let's turn the page back another day. Let's say that Laws does vote out Caleb here. Let's say it is the 3-1 vote, like we had maybe suspected up until that tribal council. So if it is Laws, Sally, and Jackson, my assumption is Laws would win. I don't know what Sally has in her, but we got a sequence a couple episodes ago about like how fit Laws is. So if she wins there, is she taking Sally to the end? Or is she going to go with Jackson?
I think she takes Sally to the end. I don't think the idol play. Maybe actually, you know what? Perfect, because I've not gone to listen to you and Chappelle. The half idol play gambit where it was a I'm taking it just to give it back to you. Like I was this to you a move, and was this a move that you think Law saw as a viable move also or not?
That's something that we talked about yesterday as well. Certainly, the way they were talking to her at camp after that did make it feel like it was a move, but maybe it's because it was a little bit of like in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Of like, again, if this was as much of an amorphous blob of a trio as we've been led to believe, that it's like, well, Sally, you did something that was very buzzy at tribal council. Good for you. And so I guess she could try to sell it as that, even though to us, and I certainly think to the jury, it would not be seen as such. That's where I think the discrepancy could lie, is I don't think the jury saw it as a move. In fact, they saw it as pretty much a non-move. But I think there could be a world where Laws is like, look what Sally just did in front of the jury. What has Jackson done in front of the jury lately? Diddly squat.
Yeah, it gets to be interesting because I think, and we'll talk about the jury stuff in a second. Have they been continuously seeing every person leaving from the quote unquote other side as a Jackson vote default? Because that's the other thing you have to factor in. If it's so cut and dry that it's a 50-50, is that where the lines are drawn? Is that where you now are worried because you're like, well, I have none of the Jackson votes, but if I put my own people up there, I have all those votes and I win. Maybe that's an argument to be made. Because otherwise, if you then have it be you and Sally, who's going to have your votes? You've been loyal to your group, but Sally has been decently loyal. Sally has also seemed to be more wishy-washy, more willing to make moves with other people. Maybe they reward that. You don't know that for a fact. Maybe this move on Keeley is a move that they would consider. That Keeley basically said, actually, you know what? Let me take a step back. Remember 2 seasons ago when someone said, I have an idol and I'm God. I could save this person, but I'm betting on myself. I think this is the second time I brought this up in the last the season's coverage. But I mean, we saw this happen with Ferris, saying that I have Kirby's life in my hands. I'm not going to give her a second chance here. So maybe that could have been seen as a big move. Again, it all comes down to marketing and how you're going to do it. So I don't know, Mike. I think the move would have been to go with Sally. I think that's where I land ultimately.
I would not be surprised though if I could, like you coached it before. I feel like if she feels like the argument that Jackson made to Caleb could be something that he similarly makes to Laws, which is like, you and Sally have been working together the entire merge, and she might have better relationships than you do. So there honestly could be a world where Laws and Caleb could make the same mistake here. And that is where also the beautiful irony of this lies, right, Pooya, is that yesterday, Chappelle and I minced no words when we talked about how much we felt Laws ruined her game, basically, in making this move. That she had, we thought, guaranteed herself second place, but second place at the most. How wild is it that Laws kept in the game the one person, apparently, who would have gotten rid of her at 3? That is just bananas.
Unfathomable to me. I can't believe I genuinely did not think we would be talking about this scenario here today. Like midway through the episode. Hell, about almost done the episode. I didn't think we were talking about this scenario, but here we are.
Here we are, and what we are looking forward to is quite the showdown between the big breakfast boys. Leave some room in your stomachs, folks, because we will be feasting tomorrow. I mean, I will say, when it comes to final twos in Australian Survivor, George and Haley are S tier, untouchable. But I kind of feel like from a story perspective, this might be number 2. Because usually with these final twos, right, and it's endemic to the final two dynamic, is like you will have a power player, and then maybe you'll have someone who's a little less considered in the edit. But here we have these two guys, again, who have been squabbling with one another, arguing with one another. I don't think particularly like each other, even through a month and a half of this game. And they're facing off against each other, and this is not coincidental. It's not like it was Caleb, Jackson, and Simon, or Brooke or Keely, and they're like, okay, well, we got to get rid of them at 3.
Yeah.
Caleb actively engineered this outcome to have the two of them face off against each other. You
One
mentioned this
more time.
at the very beginning. It is incredibly detrimental to his game, but it is so much fun for the narrative, for the lulls, for the good TV.
It's better TV for us. I think ultimately that's what it is because I will stand, I would have stood corrected, but I genuinely thought a Laws and Caleb final two would be a slaughter. That's how I was perceiving it. I could have been wrong. Maybe it's just the lack of me seeing Laws's game. I don't know. But this feels a little bit more wide open until we break it down. Maybe once we talk jury, I change my mind on that. But I think that Caleb has had this like weird energy, like very animated energy all season long. Jackson is literally a wrestler cutting promos to save himself here. So at the very least, we're going to have a very fiery final tribal. And that's all I can really ask for.
Well, let's throw ourselves into the fire here, Pooya. Let's try
Okay.
to do. Now, it has been near impossible, as we've indicated many times, to speculate about the direction this season will go, but we're going to try our best here and go through how we think this jury vote might shake down. Now, let us say that a lot of this might be indicative, especially with a couple people, on what is said at the final tribal council. Again, I think some players have indicated that the vast majority of the time, despite claiming to the contrary, people do kind of go in with their minds made up. But
Mhm.
anything could happen, especially this season. They have had live tribal councils out the wazoo. Why not throw the final one on top of the pile here? But let's go through the jury and talk through who we think will be the most likely to vote for a certain finalist over the other. So let's
Okay.
start at the very beginning here. I think that unless Caleb either really squanders his arguments or Mark is just so turned off by what he did to Laws, as just even from a strategic perspective, I do think that Caleb has Mark's vote in the bag.
I currently feel like Caleb does have Mark's vote as well. I feel like also when you're a player who feels like they are a good player, and Mark should, because I think he's a very good player. I think you always want to give credit to the person who bested you. And I think Caleb technically would have bested him the best. And Mark is a Mark. Think of all the alliance names this man made. Mark is a mark for good TV. And that face break of getting rid of Laws, the time the tribal stood still and just watched each other in absolute disbelief will get rewarded. I think that's one vote to Caleb.
All right, well, let us move on to Blanche. And Blanche is obviously a bit of an enigma in so many ways, but she has indicated to me, and we saw this a little bit on the show, that Blanche and Caleb did have a relationship, that they were
Mm-hmm.
clearly getting on. I think, was it Brooke or Lottie made a joke of like, who would have thought the showmance of the season would have been Blanche and Caleb? And Blanche was not feeling great about Jackson. Jackson
Right,
obviously was
right.
part of Beauty and the Beast that left her in the dark. Jackson was part of the group alongside Ben that turned things on to her during that infamous fake idol, real idol tribal council. So I imagine that Blanche will not be moved. I think she has a certain opinion about both men, and she would go with Caleb here.
I would co-sign.
Okay, so we're looking pretty good so far.
I thought a little ahead, Mike. I think I know where this is going, but let's keep going.
All right, let's get to Ben here. So again,
Ben.
9 times out of 10, you'd be like, you got blindsided by your number one ally. You should be pissed off, righteous AF. But again, it seems like even in the moment, Ben was okay with what Jackson did. He clearly likes him
Mm-hmm.
as a person, and I think he's going to be really impressed by what he was able to do. Jackson expressed it the previous day. If I come back from a 3 versus 1 scenario, that is going to be the greatest story in Australian Survivor history. And so I do think that even if Ben was feeling a certain way about Jackson, these last few days, I do think he was rooting for him, considering he was the underdog. And so, again, despite the optics of Jackson being the sole person to determine his ouster in that moment, in this demented sense of logic, the snow globe that the season exists in, I think he is one of the locked in votes for Jackson.
I would agree with that. I think this is our first Jackson vote of the jury so far.
All right, so give me your thoughts on Simon here. We get into the string of like returnees slash pseudo returnees here. And again, we could talk about the fact of, are these returnees trying to vote as objectively as possible as they declared? Are they incorporating
Mm-hmm.
relationships in? Give me your thoughts on what Simon's thoughts would be on this final two.
I feel like and this is me remembering correctly. I feel like this is where Jackson gets a second vote. I feel like they had a bit of a relationship, a decent amount. Um, they were part of the Beauty and the Beast alliance, both of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were both there. I think that Jackson flipping over also, this is where Simon might be getting that vote. I don't know. I could see it being Caleb. I could hear that argument, but my instinct is telling me it's a Jackson vote. Lock it in.
I would agree with that because
Okay.
let's also remember back to Simon's boot. I mean, yes, there is this whole thing of if Simon and Jackson got to the end, I think Simon could easily say, okay, Jackson, you thought you made the move, but I was the one who made the move by convincing you to actively shoot yourself in the foot here. But Simon tells him several times, like, I owe you my life. Like, you did me this solid. I am locked in with you to the end. I do think that Simon will value that loyalty in the final vote. Like, I promised I had your back. Even though we're sitting on opposite sides of tribal council, I will honor that. Not only that, Simon, of course, has had a narrative for over 100 days of basically playing from the bottom, of being that
Yes,
underdog. I
that's
think
right.
he can really connect with what Jax is doing. And it's also a little bit of like Simon self-sabotage as well. And that Simon also would purposely put himself in the bottom almost and have to claw and scrape his way to a more optimal position. I think he sees a lot of himself in Jackson. And I think he really values the move that he made and clearly the relationship that they had. So I do think he votes for Jackson.
Okay, so that brings us what 2-2 right now.
2-2.
Close.
Let's go to Cameron.
Cameron. Ooh, Cameron might be one. Interesting. Okay. Cameron, to me, might be the one of the few people on this jury that I see as being like, why did you get me out? That makes no sense. Nope. I will not do this. Because did he remind me where Caleb was with Cameron when Cameron leaves?
So here's the thing is that Caleb was actually rather close with Cameron. Cameron said that he
Uh-huh.
and Caleb just really vibed with one another. I mean, maybe that's the reason why Caleb is as angry as he is when Cameron doesn't take him to IKEA because like he felt that they had something going on. So on the one hand,
Mm.
yes, he might feel betrayed by that. On the other hand, Cameron does not really like Jackson. He has said as much to me in our exit interview, and I'm
Okay.
sure he maybe felt it in the moment that he just felt him and Jackson can never get on the same page. Obviously all the bloviating Jackson was doing at Tribal Council of like, these people think they're running the show, but they have no idea how the show works. Cameron obviously, ironically enough, was not liking how mouthy Jackson was. I could see him be a little bit more up in the air depending on who makes a big argument, but I think he has a better relationship with Caleb, despite the fact that Caleb arguably exacted the bigger betrayal. Obviously, Jackson voted for Cameron, but he had no idea Cameron was going.
Okay. So then easy. That's easy then. We put this one in the Caleb column.
All right, let's move on to Brooke. Pooya, what do you think Brooke is going to do?
So when I said I looked ahead and thought ahead and I thought this is going to decide the outcome, I think on the surface, Jackson has worked with Brooke for a long time. Jackson was one the remainder that remains on voting with Brooke here at the end
Love
before
saying that. You love making that reference.
only around you and Liana. No one else will ever understand me. That being said, I think that the fact that Caleb was able to pull the wool over Brooke's eyes, and this is the Brooke who has a good read on when to play an idol, and has good reads on instincts on like how people feel about her. He played her, Mike. He lied about having that half idol. She gave up too much information to him, and from there on, she was on the back foot. There was nothing she could do that could save her. Not enough bluffing, not enough, side eye, nothing. I think she's going to respect that. I think she's going to see that as a very good move from Caleb. I'm thinking she's a Caleb vote right now.
This is where you and I diverge, sir.
Ooh, fun.
Because Brooke has said that she did have a good relationship with Jackson. She actually pointed something out to me that I did not realize until she highlighted it, that technically Jackson never voted against Brooke. Even when
Okay.
they were technically on opposite sides, Jackson was
Mhm.
always someone to be like, he voted for Mark, obviously, he voted for Blanche even during that wild tribal council. Obviously, he flips over to the other side. It seems like from what Brooke is saying, she and Jackson did have this sort of like mutual understanding with one another, where even when they were on opposite sides of the beach, Jackson was still trying to help massage situations to try to keep
Hmm.
Brooke around. I think Brooke values that. And yes, I do think being shaken down to reveal you have a half idol is fantastic on Caleb's part. But what did Brooke just watch? It's a little akin to Simon, right? In that she was
Hmm.
someone who has been scrapping and fighting and somehow incredibly surviving every tribal council until she couldn't anymore. And she basically passed the torch on to Jackson with that, because
Okay.
Jackson won 2 immunity challenges. And when he was dead to rights, much like Brooke herself was during that Blanche Tribal Council, she watched him firsthand, again, from her perspective, perhaps, talk his way into Kayla making a $500,000 mistake. I think she's going to respect that. If I'm recalling correctly, like I think she is the one who said after Jackson made his argument, she's like, "Oh, he's good." So I could see a
Is
world where,
that
like,
yeah.
like you said, I think that there could be a world where Brooke like really appreciates the move that Caleb did, especially if he explains it in a way that showcases like I was able to take down one of the biggest players of the season. But I do feel like she might lean Jackson here.
I'm demoting my Caleb to I'm up in the air. She could go either way for me.
Hmm. All right, well, let's move into Keely here. Is Keely in lockstep with Brooke, or do you think she might think differently when it comes to Jackson versus Caleb?
I think Keely's gonna love the cold bloodedness of what he did to Caleb did to Laws. I do. I really see that being very Keely could have been like that was incredible. Um, but I mean, this goes back to then because okay, if we're talking about Simon as someone who could consider Jackson, and
Hmm.
and we're talking about Brooke in the same way, they all passed their underdog baton to each other as they went out. Jackson is the last of that breed. He's the last of that generation where he was the underdog. He was in a 3v1 and comes back on top, literally putting his body on the line, winning an immunity when he needed to. So do we see them seeing Jackson as an extension of themselves? And then that's how you vote for yourself, is by you vote for the person who represents you in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, we see that all the way back to Sandra's second win in Heroes versus Villains, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, Sandra, you didn't get out Russell and Parvati, but you're not Russell and Parvati, and so I'm going to vote with you as sort of my representative of the endgame.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and say Jackson.
I will tepidly say Jackson as well. Like, certainly, Keely had a working relationship with him by the end of the game. And look, I think
Mm-hmm.
obviously played more with Caleb. They spent every day of that game together, including on Redemption Beach. And clearly, she was trying to work on a relationship there that just didn't pan out. But I know that you say, okay, wow, she'll look at what Caleb did and so cold blooded and commend it. But like, also look at how she reacted to Sally when she felt like Sally had strung her along. Like, if she feels empathetic for Laws and what Caleb made her feel like, she was, as I mentioned before, one of the rare people to not immediately give a good game to the person that kind of snaked her in the end. So if she's sort of mapping that onto Laws as well, she may not necessarily be in Caleb's column. No, I think she has enough of a relationship and knowledge of Caleb's entire body of work that she could give him a vote. I think she's still fairly up in the air, but
Mm-hmm.
I would lean her more in Jackson's favor rather than Caleb's at this point.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
All right, let's go to Sally here. Sally, a big question mark because I haven't talked with her yet, so I don't exactly know like what her relationships were
Right.
for either one of these people. Jackson, she was working to get out, but then worked alongside him to get out Caleb. But could it be a case, Pooya, where it's like, hey, props to you, man. Caleb also spent every day with Sally. And so maybe Sally's like, listen, I was coming for you, Jackson was coming for you, but you made your way to the end. Good on you, buddy.
I think she goes for Caleb. Also, having your game get taken down to fire and losing at the hands of like it's a very personal defeat. I'm
Mm.
gonna go with Caleb here.
I would agree right now. I think, as is Sally's MO, as you mentioned, I think she could go either way, but I do feel like as you said, this sort of level of respect of like, listen, I want to go on and win the game, and you're the one to take me out, and so let me sort of pass the buck or 500,000 bucks on to you. Makes a lot of
Mhm.
sense. We're going into the final vote here of laws. So Pooya, talk to me about the turnaround. Do you think Laws is an immediate quote unquote bitter vote towards Caleb, or do you think she has enough of a game respects game attitude to give a vote to someone who just brutally blindsided her the day before?
He sugarcoated it. Like, he didn't need to do all that. He did not need to sugarcoat it. I think he did too much. I just saw my daughters, and then you did this to me. Like, I don't like that. That pisses me off. I stood there for 4 hours on the goodwill of, hey, no matter who wins, we're taking each other. So let's just try and get a resume notch each. All right, let's just try and do that. If I knew you were going to get rid of me, why am I still standing there? Well, like, why? I currently think, and I would love that if Laws is like, it's bigger than the game for me, you played the better game, right? Do I? The thing is, though, one thing that I keep going back to, Mike, is that no matter how badly he did Laws, we literally have Jackson talking about how him and Laws have no working relationship. Ever.
Tom and Jerry.
Yeah. We watched Laws be like, yep, I just didn't trust you, man. Like, I didn't trust you. That's why I didn't vote your way. And he went out of his way to let her know, you just gave Caleb so much ammunition. You just gave Caleb all the resume. So does Laws go into being like, well, he was going to win anyway. And at the end of the day, I was closer to him. So I'm begrudgingly give him my vote. I don't know.
I mean, here's the thing, though, Pooya. I'm tabulating these results. If what we prognosticate is correct, going into Laws' vote, it is 4v4. Caleb has Mark, Blanche, Cameron, and Sally, and Jackson has Ben, Simon, Brooke, and Keely. It would all come down to Laws' vote. And there's two different ways we could go here, right? There is the sort of just desserts, almost like Boston Robin All-Stars, of like the one person to screw you over, to serve as like the swing vote, is the one that you unnecessarily betrayed the day before. But isn't it also in the realm of this season to zag where surely we should zig, and for her to be like, damn it, Caleb, I just love you too much to deprive you of $500,000. It could really go in either direction here. I'm gonna say Jackson, because I think I'm still subscribing to the logic that like Caleb makes a $500,000 mistake. This is why, it was built up as such a big deal, that it was highlighted by so many people as like, oh my God, why did he do that? But I could see a world where she gives it to him, and then we're coming back here tomorrow night and we're like, okay, good on you, Caleb. You're going to win either way, but why did you make this so much harder for yourself?
I think I'm going to go with Caleb here.
Okay, yeah, let's put the decision here.
Yeah, I think that if you want to bring up we brought up the Woo and Tony of it all, I could see this ultimately being like, you hurt me, enjoy the money, but you did hurt me, and I need you to understand that you hurt me, so I'm not going to just laugh and haha that you hurt me. So,
oh my God, if Laws delivers a speech on the level of Trish to Tony, my God, I will be giddy all over again getting to watch this final tribal council. So that's the way we have things mapped out right now. Again, this season is perhaps the best example of the best laid plans of mice and men. So for all we know, it might be like a unanimous vote for somebody. It might be, a 8-1, 7-2. But right now, we actually have it be 5-4, which is remarkably close. It reminds me actually a little bit more of Colby and Tina, or again, Sharn and Shane, where yes, it was looked at as Sharn making a $500,000 mistake by voting out Brian, but she didn't nearly win the game. So we might be facing a remarkably similar scenario here, but perhaps flip the other way.
Yeah.
All right. Pooya, we have 3 players and we have 3 slots to give away Chizzy points. Here's the penultimate edition of our Chizzy segment. Take it away, Jacob Weinstein and MC Kala.
2, 3. 1, 1, 1, 3, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. It's getting kind of Chizzy. 3, 2, 1.
This is so weird that we have to give Chizzy points to every player in the game, considering our many thoughts about what Caleb did in this episode.
I think this is funnily enough, even though we're mandatorily have to give everyone a point, it's my easiest one of the season.
All right, tell me more.
I'm giving 1 point to Caleb because while you did win immunity, I think you made a huge mistake, a big one, an unnecessary one. Could be a losing mistake. I think just talking through the options we did though, Mike, I think he still has a win. Like he's not dead to rights, and I think if anything, he could have won either way. I think it's entirely possible, but I can't help but feel like you left the easy route on the table and you didn't. So I'm going backwards. Obviously, I'm giving him the 1. I give Laws the 2 because I think Laws put up a good fight at the immunity, and I do think that ultimately, maybe this is just more on feelings. It was very fun and touching to see her be with their kids and be so happy, and want to show them how strong she is and how much she can compete. And she literally takes Caleb to the brink there. And then I feel like the hero of this episode was the true underdog, was Jackson, easily. We've already talked at length about the emotions he emitted and the energy he gave during that whole thing. The story with his mom was so touching. Watching him, this big ass wrestler, get like baby carried by David was kind of adorable. So that as well. And then just seeing him make his fight to the bitter end and then end up standing tall, potentially having swayed some of the jury into thinking this was all him.
Yeah.
So that's my 3, 2, 1.
I completely co-sign. Now it's weird because we might come back tomorrow and it turns out that, yeah, Caleb was going to win anyway, and winning that final immunity, it was just a matter of like who ends up sitting next to him and who he wants to have more fun with. But I can't help but give him 1 here, because even if he was locked in to win, no matter what, this is one of the biggest self-owns I have seen in a penultimate round of Survivor in a long time. This felt so unnecessary, and it feels game losing. And for all the times that we've come in here and be like, well, Brooke voted out Simon, but like, I think it'll be okay. Keely voted out Brooke, but I think it'll be okay. I mentioned this a couple times ago. I'm done sort of giving people the benefit of the doubt here. I cannot help but look in the face of just how bad of a move this was for him. As much as he might be arguing things that we have not gotten the opportunity to see about Law's story, it just feels like from what we were seeing from the edit, from the on-island narrative, and from the jurors themselves, Laws was the better pick here. And Caleb had the first hand. Yes, he had the power, which should be commendable, but it's what you do with the power. So he gets the 1, and Jackson will conversely get the 3 because he had no power. And even if, again, the power was out of his hands, the optics, at least from my perspective, look like he was able to make a winning argument, perhaps literally, to Caleb to keep him in the game. I don't see a world where we come back tomorrow and this is not viewed, at least from some perspective, as Jackson convinced Caleb. And this is, again, not a Tony Wu situation where like Tony sat down Wu for hours before tribal council and convinced him to do it. They watched in real time Jackson talk to Caleb to make this final pitch.
Mm-hmm.
That just feels like such a massive win for him. And I suppose 2 points to Laws by default. Maybe it's me making up for the fact that I did not give Laws any points yesterday because I did not like the move. I like it even less now, knowing that she made this laid down her entire game for someone who stomped all over it the very next day. But regardless, she was so close to winning immunity, and albeit losing the game. And it's almost like why I gave Jackson 3 points the day before. We're like, yes, she technically gets voted out and is in the minority, but like, if logic persisted, she had made the right move to get 1 step further. It's just that she fell at the hands of a truly unpredictable outcome here. So it sort of lies default that she winds up the middle option right now.
It was, yeah. I love the idea that the season's called Redemption, and we legitimately are seeing someone get another. Like Jackson having a fighting chance after being dead to rights within the same like 25 minutes is kind of amazing. Like you couldn't ask for a better moment like this. So I'm excited to see him be hungry. I'm hoping he's hungry over this. So
well, they'll have their own big boy breakfast to sit down to before the actual breakfast.
Yes.
I mean, I think he is riding high right now. Like he was able to pull a rabbit out of a hat. And again, whether it was his own doing or Caleb. So I think we are in for an absolute brawl tomorrow, though I do think Caleb has to be a certain amount of tail tucked between his legs to kind of face up to Laws, and certainly some questions about the decision that he made. But regardless, it is going to be so much fun to have these two actually face off in the end. An outcome that we were, again, like joking about weeks ago is actually
Mhm.
fruition. Regardless of how it shapes out, we will have one of these guys be the winner. We will watch the reunion, which Pooya, I've heard some tea about. Not spoiled.
Ooh.
What? And I know that it took place apparently like outdoors at like
Okay.
right next to the Sydney Harbor. So quite the picturesque location. We'll see if noise pollution comes into effect, but we'll hear a lot from these players about the many, many decisions that they made. And we'll be here talking about those many, many decisions and giving our thoughts. So I talked about this on the last podcast, but if you don't know, we are going to be doing things a little bit later. We'll do things a little bit differently tomorrow night. We are going to be sort of saving our thoughts for the finale, for the reunion, and for the season overall until 9 p.m. Eastern in the Americas time on Tuesday night. Ordinarily, we like to put these up, right when the episode drops in Australia. We want to give it a little bit of time to, chew over things, check out maybe some stuff that people are saying online. So that is 9 p.m. Eastern. I believe it might be 11 a.m. on Wednesday, I want to say, in AEDT. So be sure to check that out. I think we're going to be live as well. So you want to make sure you're going to be, if you have the time, tune in with us. Leave your comments, not only about, our thoughts on this season, but your thoughts on this season as well, because I'm sure you all have plenty. Pooya, anything else you want to say before we check back in 24 hours from now? And much like Laws, we will see if our opinions change between then and now.
I'm excited, man. I'm excited. We're gonna see how it plays out, and we'll know which one of me or Chappelle wins the draft.
That's the true bout, the battle of the big boys that we have
Yep.
been vouching for this entire time.
Yeah, so it's gonna be incredible. I'm excited. I can't wait to talk to you and Chappelle about it at length. And I just feel like with everything we've seen this season, I can't imagine we're gonna have a ho-hum quiet finale. So I'm pumped to talk about it live.
Yeah, I mean, you and I were possibly projecting a 5-4 vote, even in the midst of all of this. So
Yes.
I still think we have a couple of fireworks left to launch off tomorrow night, and we will talk about all the fallout that occurs in just a little bit of time. Thank you all so much for listening. I cannot believe we talked for an hour plus, but this was a wild way to end the episode and set up a lot to discuss, both about the move as well as what is to come tomorrow. And we shall see if all those plans go up in smoke, much like many plans this season. But regardless, I have been having so much fun talking about this. I cannot believe it is all coming to an end tomorrow. But regardless, I am so grateful for the time we have had. I want to envelop you all in a big hug like Jackson did with David and weep into your arms. But we're saving the tears for finale, as we've got one more episode to talk about, and it is a big one. Until then, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.